I'm Dr. Michael Latola.
And I'm Megan Strong.
Today, a dentist fan writes in from the other side of the world.
And is it time to throw out the teddy bears and get some needles to comfort your patients?
And finally, there's something else to do with your kids' baby teeth rather than use them to propagate a lie about a man with wings who brings money for them. That and more on today's Chairside Live.
It's a girl.
Oh, it's true. Hey now, hello and welcome to episode 85 of Chairside Live. Megan, how are you?
I'm good. It sounds like that voice is still trying to
It's
recover.
still a little laryngitis. I lectured on Monday in Pittsburgh and I felt so sorry for them. I had one huge coughing fit before lunch for like the last 20 minutes before lunch where I could get about 3 or 4 words at a timeout, and then I'd start hacking, and then I get another 3 or 4 words out.
Sounds enjoyable. But just remember, cough or sneeze, cover please.
I will. Now,
Thanks.
Did you get sick? It seems like everybody I know has been sick.
Yes. I did not get the cold thing that's going around, but I did get a stomach bug, which was, let's see, one word, miserable.
Really?
Oh my goodness. I haven't had like the stomach flu in years, it seems like. And yeah, it's just as bad as I remember.
As you remember
Yep.
it? You remember there was Seinfeld used to talk about that. He had an unbroken streak of not throwing up for 17 years that he was very proud of. There was another employee here who told me he was driving over on Friday to one of the other buildings, and everything was fine, and he pulls into the parking lot of the other building, and as he's getting ready to park, he realized all of a sudden, I'm going to throw up, and he had to open the door to his car and lean out and throw up. It hit him just like that, and then he was at home the rest of the weekend feeling awful.
Yeah, confession session, that exact same thing happened to me, but luckily it was in the privacy of my condo complex parking lot and not in front of one of our offices. But yes, that did happen.
Well, it seemed like it was in the privacy. There was a security camera footage. Let's go to that now.
No.
That would have been good, huh?
Uh-huh.
Here's Megan, with her typical reaction to one of my bad jokes. Getting sick.
Yep,
Well,
unusual.
Better than our illnesses, we've got a great case of the week for you this week. It's a dentist who is actually a pretty big account here, and she's a really good dentist, but she's been frustrated lately with some of her results, and I think it has to do with the impression. So let's take a look at her impression, and then I want to present some alternatives maybe that might give her better results, and it might be a little more time-consuming than what she's doing now, but it's completely worth it when you can eliminate remakes and adjusts in your office and not have to send things back to the lab. And how awful is it to numb up a patient, take off the temporary, and try on a crown it doesn't fit, and then they have to come back again. So I would like to avoid that, and I know you'd like to avoid that too. So let's go ahead and take a look at the case of the week. I was walking through the Bruxer department the other day, and I saw my favorite sticker. That's right, it's QC Alert. This means that somebody in QC needs to take a closer look at this case and see what's going on. And this is a dentist actually who I know, actually a pretty good account. She's been working with us for a number of years and recently has started to experience more remakes than she wanted to. And I think really it comes down to the impression more than the prep. You know, if you give us an absolutely perfect prep and then the impression doesn't have the margin represented all the way around, there's always going to be a chance once that crown goes to place there could be some recurrent decay. But even if you do a prep like I used to do, where I would under-reduce it or sometimes over-taper a prep in the anterior, but you take a perfect impression of it, the lab can still send you a reduction coping so you can fix the prep on the fly. And if you have a great impression that shows the margins clearly, then it's going to be sealed and we're possibly or probably not going to get recurrent decay around that crown. So if I had to pick between the prep and the impression, I have to pick the impression as being the more important part. Just because on the prep, if it's not reduced enough on the lingual, there's reduction copings and other things. The prep can be fixed at the seat appointment while the impression cannot. So this is taken in a plastic. It's got pretty good stiffness to it. It's a thicker plastic double arch tray. And this is an impression for a crown on a second molar for a Bruxer crown. It gets a little close on the side over to the plastic on the tray, but it's really more the look of the margin itself if we look at the margin on the impression. And please let me be the first to say that every impression I took for the first 15 years of my career looked exactly like this one. My assistant, I would put the impression tray in the room, walk out of the room, walk back in 5 minutes later, and I'd say, how does it look? And my assistant would say, did we get the margin? And I'd look at it and I go, yep, we got the margin. And I would say that because, I don't know why I'd say that. I'd say that because it looked like we got the margin, but The way I understand things today is that unless you can see impression material beyond the margin, you're never quite sure if you got the margin or not. This dip right here is a good example. It's hard to tell whether that's exactly what the margin does or if in fact that's short of the margin because we don't have any material beyond the margin. And so what I used to accept as an impression like this that was okay to be sent to the lab and would do all right, today I don't feel that way, and it's not because I've gotten any better as a dentist. If anything, my eyes have gotten better in terms of recognizing what it's supposed to look like, what a good impression is supposed to look like. And as a result, there's a technique, the 2-chord technique that I blab on about all the time that allows me to get that result without waking up with all kinds of new skill in my hands that weren't there before. So when you take an impression like this, and when the end of the impression, the very edge of it, is also the margin, what happens is you pour it up in the lab, and granted, most dentists don't have access to be able to see this while it's still in their office, but the prep goes down and then it just stops right against the stone. And there's no real way of telling, if that is in fact the end of the margin. You have to kind of trim it there and hope for the best. And, it's not a perfect prep in some other areas, but it's close enough where if it was a great impression, it could probably be worked with. So as I talked to this dentist, I sent her a couple pictures. And just a couple pictures that I want to share with you that really kind of show what I had to burn into my mind about what an impression is supposed to look like when you look at it before you send it out. One of the big advantages of digital impressions is that when you take a digital impression, you look up on the computer screen, you don't see this. You don't see this negative image of an impression. You can look at the worst impression. This is far from it. But when you look at a really bad impression, when I show it in a lecture, everybody oohs and ahs because there's something awfully wrong with it, but you can't specifically say what it is. Once it's poured up and you look at it, then you go, oh, that's what's going on there. That's what the problem is. And so with the digital impression, instead of looking at a negative image like we have to with our polyvinyl impressions, when you look on the computer screen with the digital impression, you see a virtual model. And so this is what you get to see is essentially what the lab sees when we pour it up. So for us, it's kind of like cheating because we look at this. We don't really even look at your impression once it's poured. We can see all the information we need to see right here as we look at this. And of course, you don't have, as dentists, we don't have the ability to see that when we look at this. We have to kind of interpolate it. So we need to get good at looking at this and know when it's going to lead to a good model. So here's the picture that I sent her. And it's a picture of an impression that I took, but my assistant could have taken it. Anybody could take it because it got everything to do with the fact that it's the 2-chord technique. That's what gives you this kind of result. And so as we look at this, we can see the margin represented around here. That's from that round burr in the reverse preparation technique that I use. And then because of the 2-chord technique, we can see where the edge of the margin is, right at this junction, and then there's impression material about 1 millimeter beyond it. So it's this fin, this wall of material that goes around the perimeter of the prep that's beyond the margin, apical to the margin, that lets the technician know the margin is right there. I mean, it's clear as a bell where it is. In fact, trimming the die on a pour-up of an impression like this, you really don't need a burr. You can almost use your fingernail and just snap away the stone that's going to be out here and expose the margin. An impression like this does not need an expert 20 years of experience technician to be able to find the margin. This is the kind of case you give somebody who's been at a dental technician school for 2 weeks because it's so simple you could teach one of your kids to do it. So this is what I wanted her to kind of memorize and get used to seeing on her impressions. When I looked at her impression, it was clear that it was just a 1-chord impression. I mean, I've taken so many 1-chord impressions, I know what they look like. And when you see this, this is what a 2-chord impression looks like. I can tell factually this is a 2-chord impression. The only other thing it could be is a diode laser, but I know it's not because of this thickness right in here. So the thickness of the impression in this area, which is important as well because it won't bend back and forth as we're pouring in the die stone. The thickness of this impression is because this is actually impression of the 00 chord, the bottom chord that stays in the sulcus during the impression, which is why there's no bleeding because we get an impression of that chord. So another example of a 2-chord impression, and this is a little more detailed close-up of that margin, is this impression right here. And again, you can see how wide this edge is right along here. And it's usually kind of rough because this is an impression of the retraction chord that's sitting in the sulcus. And again, we have this material beyond the margin that you can see in this area. and you can see exactly where the burr marks are on the margin and exactly where that transitions to the root surface of the tooth, because this is an impression of the root surface of the tooth just apical to the margin. It is clear as a bell where this margin is. There's no question whatsoever. And by giving the technician an impression of the root structure here, of this 1 millimeter of root surface, now they can really dial in the emergence profile too. And when this crown is designed, whether it's digitally or by wax, they can really blend the gingival third of the crown with the emergence profile, with the contours, I should say, of this root surface here. In fact, if you're taking impressions like this and reducing enough and not getting just stunning crowns back from your lab, whether it's us or somebody else, you have a right to be angry and should probably switch, because this is as good as it gets. This is the pinnacle that we're all shooting for. And again, the only way, there's two ways I know how to do it. One's with the two-chord technique and one's with a diode laser. I'll show you both of them real quick. But for me, the two-chord's the more useful one, because that's the one I'm going to be using on anterior teeth. With diode lasers, I have a tendency to lose tissue height on anterior teeth, and that's worrisome. So in the two-chord technique, we've just teased out the top number 2 chord here, and you can see this dark line here in the sulcus. That's the double 0 chord that's still in place. Because that chord's in place, there won't be any bleeding. As soon as that chord comes out, there will be blood, just like the Daniel Day-Lewis movie, which should have been about gingivitis and should have been about pulling retraction cord before impressions. If you just use one chord, when you pull it out, there will be blood. Anytime you put one chord in and take it out, it bleeds. If you put 2 chords in, take the top one out, it doesn't bleed till the bottom one comes out, because that's the one that's in contact with the inflamed base of the sulcus. When you pull it off, it's like ripping off a Band-Aid. The other problem with the one chord technique is when you put it in, it drops underneath this gingival cuff down to the base of the sulcus. So when you put one chord in, it provides vertical retraction of the tissue, away from the margin, but it's not until you put the second chord in that you get lateral retraction and move the tissue laterally away from the margin. In fact, when you take that chord all the way out, you can just see there's a moat around these teeth, around these preps. There's just a huge moat, and you can see that it'd be almost impossible to miss this impression. I don't even know if you need to syringe material into place. You could probably mix up some alginate and just flick it at the preps and then seat a tray on top of it and still have it work. But regardless, we'll do it the right way. And you can see that the tip fits right into that sulcus, and as we express the material, it just flows right in front of us in that sulcus, giving us an impression of the margin of the preparation, and you can see that distinct line where the margin stops, and then it's also going to give us an impression of this 1 millimeter of root structure apical to the margin, so the technician will be able to blend the crown with the shape and the contour of that root surface. So when the impression is taken out 4 minutes later, again, it gives us that same 2-chord impression look where we can see the margin and then a thick band, a big meaty band of impression material beyond the margin, like a Great Wall of China is always how I describe it. It should not look thin like mine used to look, because in the one-chord technique, I'd rip the one chord out and then I'd try to squirt the impression material in before the sulcus filled with blood, and that's kind of a hacky way to do it. This is the prototypical kind of iconic look for the 2-chord impression technique. I'm not a big fan of lighter wash materials, by the way. I think these are a little hard to read, which is why I like a darker syringe material, I should say. Here's another case. We didn't replace any existing restorations here, so we don't have really many subgingival margins to speak of. So I'm going to go in and use a diode laser around these teeth just to expose the margins a little bit more, and then we're going to place some sort of retraction paste on top of it. Not to retract, really. It's just kind of because we've used a diode laser, so the tissue's not going to grow back that quickly. I'm using this because it's got aluminum chloride in it, and that's an astringent material that's going to stop any bleeding that might have occurred because of what we did with the laser, or any seepage afterwards that might happen. And then we rinse that off afterwards, and you can see that we've got a nice look. We've used the diode laser, so you can see some little tissue tags that we tried to clean up with a little Ultradent brush and some hydrogen peroxide, but we left a few there. But again, we have that same type of moat around the preparation, and we were able to do this with a diode laser, but because of the thickness of the tip, when we do this, we lose a little bit of tissue height. Not a big deal here on these molars, but a much bigger deal on anterior teeth, when losing tissue height could really end up being a mess. So if we go back to that first picture again, and look at that, for example, or even this second picture, and see that fin of material. And let's compare that then with the impression that was sent in by the doctor and kind of look at them side by side. And you can see the difference that is made by having that excess material beyond the margin. So in my list of what's required for an ideal or a highly acceptable impression, we need to have some impression material beyond this margin so we categorically know where the margin is. And the only way to get that I know of, the two ways, are with the two-chord technique, which I know some dentists don't like to do because it's kind of laborious. Here in California, I put the first 00 chord in during the prep sequence, and then my assistant places the top chord, the number 2 chord, on it after I leave the room when I'm done with the prep, and she gets me 8 to 10 minutes later to take the impression. Or we could do it with a diode laser, and honestly, I'm much more likely to do that type of troughing with the diode laser in the posterior. In the anterior, I use my diode laser all the time for recontouring gingiva to level out gingival levels on teeth 7 through 10, for example. You could also use an electrosurge. I just say diode laser because that's become my instrument of choice, mainly because it can be used around implants and other metals, whereas you can't do that with an electrosurge. So commit that picture to memory, both of those pictures where we have that material beyond the margin. If you can look at an impression in your office and see that material beyond the margin, you know you send it into the lab, and then it's not going to end up with a QC alert sticker. It's going to end up with a sticker with a big happy face on it and a high five, because our technicians are going to have a much easier time fabricating a quality restoration.
Now let's go to a segment we call Viewer Mail. This week's viewer mail comes to us all the way from Iraq, and
Wow.
It's from Dr. Abdul Wadud, and he says, "Dear Dr. Datola, I want to express to you my great admiration for your personality and your great work with Glidewell Laboratories. I advise all my colleagues to study Glidewell Laboratories, and I also urge them to download all the videos in your website. I've applied most of them in my clinic as best I can, especially the reverse preparation technique, which is the greatest achievement in the field of crown preparation, in my humble opinion. Finally, I have a simple request. Can you advise me how I can get the reverse prep kit in the Middle East as I live in Iraq? Thank you very much."
Wow, that is extremely nice.
Yes.
I'm glad to hear that my personality goes over well even in the Middle East. I should have known that, though. I have very broad appeal, much like Banana Republic or The Gap. You know, that's kind of how my personality is.
Okay.
And to say that the reverse prep technique was the greatest innovation in, I don't know, Crown and Bridge or something. He said something along those lines. I can't fully take credit for it. It was something that I found part of it in a prosthodontics textbook from the 1940s, back when they used belt-driven handpieces, and they were using round burrs, and this prosthodontist in this book was using it right off the bat to prep the margin at the very beginning of the prep technique. You know, I added in some depth cutters and whatever, and then just kind of merged Gordon's two-chord technique into it. And it works very well for people like myself who have a very average set of hands to help us get above average results. So I'm glad that it's working for you too, and you're letting other people know. We just recently opened Glidewell Europe. I don't know if we have any plans to go to the Middle East or if we have a Bruxer dealer there, but I'm glad that you're taking advantage of all the different CE things that we have on the website, and how to get a burr kit to the Middle East. That's a tricky one, because I have a reverse prep kit right here. Andrew, come here. Andrew. Okay. Production assistant Andrew, everybody. Hey,
welcome.
Come here. Did you drive today? Is your car here?
Yes.
Yeah, will you drive that to Iraq for me?
Sure, I'm all over it.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So it's on the way, doctor. It'll take. Can you even drive there? You might have to fly somewhere first and then rent a car.
Or rent a submarine.
And drive there. And yeah, I'd bring your passport too, Andrew. I think
might be a good idea.
Yeah, I don't know how much unrest there actually is over there, but we'll see. We'll see if we can't find a way to get it over there. And it's good to see that it's one of the amazing things. We've had Howard Ferran here at the desk and interviewed him before. He started Dental Town, and they have people now in over like 140 countries that go on and watch. Imagine 30 years ago, being a dentist wherever, in Iraq or Iceland or, well, Iceland's a bad example, but some remote area where you really didn't have access to maybe a lot of textbooks or things like that. The ability to go online today and be able to see procedures being done in America or wherever,
Right.
and
And
be
watch
able to
shows
sit and
like
watch
this.
those. Right, and to take the time to learn how to speak English so you can
Right.
actually understand what they're saying. So
great.
pretty fantastic. All right, well, thank you. You got any news for us today?
I do. There may be hope for gagging-prone patients who avoid the dentist. A recent Italian study suggests acupuncture may help. In the study, 20 patients received acupuncture before taking dental impressions, and they found the patients' gagging scores were reduced more than 6-fold on average. The doctor first took impressions on the individuals and had them score their gag reflex from 0 to 10. A month later, they took the impressions again, this time with acupuncture needles in place for the entire procedure. For the upper impressions, the mean score went from 6.8 to 1.1, and the lowers, the mean score went from 5.45 to 0.4.
That's impressive on that
is.
upper one to go from 7 on a scale of 1 to 10 down to 1 like that.
Sure.
That's really amazing. Did it show where she was doing the acupuncture? Did it actually show the locations of where the needles went?
It did. I know that one of them was like around like right here,
Mm-hmm.
which I know is a point that is for nausea, and it triggers something in the brain to not get nauseous. And so a lot of people actually, when they're feeling nauseous, will just press on their wrist like this. So I know for sure that that they had needles there, but I'm not sure exactly where they put the rest of them. And then they had the needles were in for the entire procedure, and then they were in for a while they just laid there before they left as well.
Well, I would love to get someone over here to, and I think somebody told me that they do, maybe they said acupressure at our wellness center.
We have acupuncture as well.
Okay, I thought so. I thought somebody told me that. That would be fun to bring that person over and find somebody who gags. There's plenty of people who really don't necessarily gag, like gagging, I'm going to throw up. But there's plenty of people where you take an upper impression on them and it's really uncomfortable because
Sure.
it gets back onto the soft palate. And I'd be fascinated. I'd love to make a videotape of that and see if it actually
That would be great.
If it actually
Case
worked.
of the week.
Exactly. Case of the week, take some needles and stick it in somebody's wrist. Of course, if somebody said to me, you're gagging, let me put some needles in your wrist, I go, you know what, I might be able to suck it up for this next impression. We'll keep the needles out of my wrist.
Right. And the researchers did say that, maybe it is, part of it is that they're getting more comfortable with the procedure because it was done, twice, once in the beginning and then a month later. But I think that for those scores to jump that highly, to decrease that much, that it's got to have something to do with the needles too. And they pointed to other studies that have been done. I know one's been done in Britain that showed the same results. So.
Yeah, if I come in though and I have something done and it's a 7 on a scale from 1 to 10 in terms of making me gag, I'm dreading it going back a month later.
Right.
So I think it's the opposite. It sounds
sure.
like the acupuncture worked. Anything else?
Yes. Next time your child loses a tooth, grab it before the tooth fairy can snatch it from underneath the pillow. Why? Just in case you want to join in on a growing trend among parents. Mommy blogs everywhere are talking about an artist who sells her work on the online store Etsy. She creates necklaces with a sterling silver cast of baby teeth. Simply send your child's tooth, molars or incisors are fine, and then she will make an exact replica of it for you to wear around your neck. The necklaces start at around $75.
Wow, that's kind of cool. I don't spend a lot of time, this might come as a surprise, I don't spend a lot of time on mommy blogs.
I thought you did.
I don't. I didn't even know that was a thing, to tell you the truth.
Oh, it's a total thing.
Okay. I spend a lot of time on food blogs, don't get me wrong.
Yes, me too.
And fly fishing blogs. I just didn't know there
me.
was mommy. Are there daddy blogs?
Probably.
Oh, wonder what's on there.
I'm scared to find out.
But I like the idea, but I don't that they're casting them in metal. I took out some bicuspids on on a teenager who was having ortho, and the orthodontist wanted me to take out 4 bicuspids. So you're taking out 4 pristine, perfect, permanent adult teeth.
Sure.
Because they need extra room, and so you just have too many teeth and too small of a jaw. You take out these 4 perfect teeth. And I had, actually the laboratory technician cut them in half. The patient was into this too. And then a jeweler crazy glued, or whatever they did, attached some backings onto them, and they were actual teeth that were earrings for the patient. So she's got these 2 sets of her bicuspids, and they were so cool because they were perfect, no decay, nothing wrong with them. That's kind of where I thought you were going with this, that the jewelry was going to be the actual baby teeth, because you could always clean out the little pulp, soak it in a little bleach, and I guess it's okay with the metal. Maybe there's I don't know, maybe there's a taboo about wearing actual body parts in a
Well,
necklace.
I don't know. Keisha, the pop singer, is big. She's actually in rehab right now, and the rehab told her that she's not allowed to receive teeth from fans while she's in rehab. But before that, she was requesting that fans send in their actual teeth so that she could make bras out of it and jewelry and all this stuff. So I guess, which I find so odd with strangers' teeth, but whatever, that's a different story. But I guess some people are into dental jewelry. I personally don't want to wear anyone's teeth, including my own, but I do see as a way, I mean, like, if you save your kid's teeth, like, oh, what's their first lost tooth? Like, what do you do with it, you know? So I think if making jewelry out of it, I guess, is a way to preserve it without having to keep the tooth or something. I don't know. But she also does rings as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be like a ring with the tooth on top. But
I would just, maybe the tooth itself, maybe she should be putting them in lucite blocks. Something kind of related that I did with my kids, and I always thought it'd be a great business, and like for a dental assistant. I had them come in here one day when they were really small. We mixed up a big thing of alginate and pressure material and had my daughter stick her hand in. And then, you let it set. It only takes about a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and you have her take it out of the alginate and you pour it up. And alginate, which we use for like silent night appliances and night guards and things like that, it's pretty accurate. And it was scary. When we poured it up in stone, you could see all the little lines on her hand.
Whoa.
And because her hands were like this, you could put them, if I had put a base on them the right way, it could almost be like they were praying, but just have her two hands sitting there.
Praying that her dad wouldn't make her do weird things like this
Yeah,
anymore.
take impressions of her face while we're at it or something like that. But it was so anatomically correct that it was almost scary because it looked like we'd chopped off her hands and spray painted them yellow. But I don't know if anybody does that. I know they do the handprints, but to see the actual hands is kind of cool because you get a real three-dimensional idea of how small they really were.
I've seen it at like county fairs where they dip their hands in wax and make the wax molds. But
this is an upscale version of that.
Right. So, and I think that, and the story was kind of alluding to the fact that those days are kind of in the past now, and maybe this is more of the updated version of those keepsakes.
Right.
But
right. I would do it with a tooth. I would wear my tooth if I had one taken out. And my appendix. Anything.
I'll keep that in mind for your birthday.
Almost anything that came out of my body I'd wear on a necklace. All right, that'll about wrap it up for this edition of Chairside Live. On behalf of myself, Megan, Andrew, the rest of the CSL crew, and everybody here at the lab, I want to thank you for your time and your continued commitment to quality dentistry.
We'll see you next time. Thank you for that, Dr. D.
You're welcome.
Now let's... It appears that I have given him the stomach flu. Thank you for that, Dr. D. Now, I swear, he did the slow blink on purpose. Thank you for that, Dr. D.
You're welcome.
Now let's go to a segment we call the YouTube Comment of the Week. Nope, it's viewer mail.
Coffee break.
Ha 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 ha.
Propagate a lie about a man with wings who brings money for them.